I'm not. I'm not for it. Okay? I mean, I was for Measure J because Measure J was about building the downtown and getting the kick-starting projects and getting the downtown built. And look what we have going on behind us here. It's happening. It's fantastic and it's good. But I'm not for another tax that's going to go straight into the general fund. That's my problem with it. Originally, it was purposed to go straight to police and fire, and that's exactly what I wanted it to be. And I wouldn't have their endorsement from the police department today if they didn't support me in that way. So that's what I wanted. But the problem is that this form of creating extra money is kind of like passing the buck. So I can tell you this much. I'm going to help the police department and the fire department get what they need, regardless of whether the tax passes or not, because I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and do what it takes to balance a budget so that we can have perfect public safety in this town.
This is a beautiful segue from what I was saying. What is a general plan? And this is where it all comes home. First of all, on the Measure D sales tax increase of 1/2 cent, I'm not happy with the outcome of what happened with Measure J, because the first thing we did with it is put $32 million into a private escrow account that went to John Westman without oversight and auditing controls. And to this day, we do not know the status of that account. But what has happened, I also have what is called the budget cut list. And let me tell you what it does, which is very typical. You would know on a budget cut, the first that's going to happen is everything that's near and dear to our hearts. It's going to hit the daycare, summer camps, skate park, community center, desert highlands, swim center, homeless services, graffiti removal, and parks and street maintenance, and then all of our economic development programs. These are unthinkable cuts if Measure D does not pass. I do not, believe me, approve of 1/2 cent sales tax increase. But the problem here is, my caveat to you is that it is unthinkable to go into bankruptcy, because bankruptcy would destroy our last chance to go into what I call general plan provisions. The general plan is a switchboard to correct what the city has not done, and it can correct overnight, but it takes expertise. And that is when you go into business sector planning, where you go back and find the true and appropriate value of your property, and you go ahead on the business incentives into the programming, the funding, and the capital improvement planning that it takes to pull out appropriate value as you do your corridor planning, as you do your Section 14 planning. From what I see, we have severely underassessed the use of our land. We've got a pig in a poke. We put high-density residential, well, we've neglected affordable housing altogether. But what we've done is we've taken prime commercial lands and we've converted them to single-family residential. We get over into the convention center where we get a high return on the land, and we put in assisted living. We've done it all over town because we do not follow the general plan. But the problem is we're not getting the economic value of the land now. Until we correct that, we're going to go into bankruptcy, and that's a given.
Well, next week you will probably be getting your ballot pamphlet in the mail. And in the pamphlet you will see the argument that I wrote in opposition to the sales tax measure. I decided that I had several objections to the sales tax measure, and why I decided to write that argument in opposition to it and to oppose the sales tax. First of all, I think the way that it was sold to the public, or the way that City Hall is trying to sell it to the public, is fundamentally dishonest. It's not going to get you better police protection. It's not going to get you better streets. It's not going to get you more fire protection. It's about paying the expanding healthcare and pension benefits of City Hall employees. And the city manager has said that. If you were at the July 27th meeting, you would know that's what it's about. So, as Judge Judy says, don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. I'm sorry, I've had quite enough of that. And the other thing is just a practical consideration. So this $6.5 million that you're going to get every year is not going to reduce any of that $220 million unfunded pension and healthcare liability. It's just another way of kicking the can down the road. We simply have to reinvent the way we do business. We've got to go take that budget apart and completely reorganize it. We have a general fund that has $110 million in it, but then we have all these separate funds, up to 40 separate funds, that have another $110 million about it that the public never even hears about. And there's sort of a little side agreement where they can take money and put it back. We need to integrate that budget. We need to reinvent the way we're doing business.
Well, I guess I'm a little different. I do support the half-cent tax. Number one, because I want to enhance public safety. I want the fire departments, I want the police departments to have the staff they need. I want them to have the resources, the equipment. Now, I know there have been some, as my colleagues have said already, we need to look at the budget very carefully. Maybe I was sold a bill of goods when they said it would enhance the public safety. I'm going to stand by that because it's either pay me now, pay me later. I can't even think of this city going into bankruptcy. So if you don't have the quality police and fire departments, nobody's going to come here. And our economy is based on tourism. So if the tourists find out that we don't have a good police force, a good fire response stations, then we're not going to have the tourists. So yes, we're going to have to. If it passes, hopefully I will study that very carefully and make sure that the fire and police departments get what they need. Thank you.
The question was how we would increase revenue. And one of the ways that we increase revenue is by having a strong and vibrant business community in our town. A place where people want to come to visit, where they do spend their money in Palm Springs. The word bankruptcy's been thrown around. There are 3 cities in California that have come close to bankruptcy: Vallejo, Stockton, and San Bernardino. None of those 3 cities have anything in common with Palm Springs. It was not pension obligations that drove those cities close to bankruptcy. What drove them close to bankruptcies was a failing local economy. A place where people no longer wanted to live, where they no longer wanted to make investments. If we're going to grow our economy, we have to make investments in our town so that we continue to attract people from all over the country and all over the world to come into our town. I think we should get to the question of what will we do if this tax does not pass. Ladies and gentlemen, budgets are exercises in mathematics, not wishful thinking. You are going to have to look at numbers, add up what revenue do we have and what expenses do we have. If those expenses are exceeding, something's going to have to be cut. And I would love to stand here today and tell you that we can vote down that tax and we will still have all of the revenue we need for absolutely everything that we want. That's not telling the truth. I'm going to tell you the truth in this campaign, and if you elect me, I'm going to tell you the truth on City Council. I will add the dollars up and make sure that we have the revenue to cover our expenses, and I will not make promises to our employees that we cannot keep.
Measure D was a difficult one for me. I know we supported Measure J in 2011, and that was exciting to support our economy and the revitalization of downtown. People are saying, we'll take a hard look at the budget. Well, we can't have our cake and eat it too. I have taken a hard look already at the budget. I agree that we need to set aside $6 to $7 million a year to pay for our unfunded liabilities that are coming, regardless of what we do. I think it's fiscally responsible to support Measure D because we don't have those cuts to make that will affect the basic services and our public safety. We're just at a point where we've recovered from the recession and our police and fire are at pre-recession levels. I'm talking about growing and diversifying our economy so that Palm Springs can continue to thrive, so that people who work and have small businesses can continue to make money here. If we cut at the time that we're growing, it will seriously affect our economic progress and our growth, and I'm very concerned about that. I'm concerned to see the few quality of life amenities that we have on the cut list. I'm concerned to see our animal shelter on that cut list. I don't want to cut from Palm Springs residents. We cannot cut, and for those reasons, I'm supporting Measure D. It's difficult as a political candidate and as a leader to take a hard decision like that. I heard how you clap, so I know where you stand. But I'm willing to take that stance to say it's easier to criticize this measure and say we can, have more police and we don't have to pass this tax. I just don't think that's correct, looking at the numbers and what one PS budget committee has done and what dozens of people looking at this budget have done. I want to talk about increasing revenues streams so we can grow, diversify our economy, recruit new industries so that we're not so focused on just one type of industry here, bringing new jobs here, lobbying the county and the state for investments here. I think we should look at increasing our TOT rate for rentals, which is lower than some of the other cities in the desert and is much, much lower than a number of other tourist destinations. So we need to talk about both, and that's a hard conversation to have, but we need to have those conversations. We can't just have platitudes and feel-good comments. We really need to have hard conversations so that we don't affect the quality of life for residents.
Rentals. There's no ordinance that says that 98% of the homes around you could not be turned into vacation rentals. Currently they could, and that's a problem. It's a problem, first of all, I didn't want to have to make those calls. I just didn't want to have to make that call. I didn't feel like that's the job of the homeowner in a single family dwelling residence. But the other thing is, I've been here for 12 years, longer than any of these candidates. I remember what happened when our economy hit the skids. Do you remember those second homeowners? Do you know what happened to them? They disappeared, and they left vacant properties, and we're a resort community. Our economies have always been like this. The more heavily invested we are with non-resident ownership, the more vulnerable we become to economic fluctuations, which can be very damaging. So I think we need to do a better job of controlling them. There is an ordinance that's coming forward. There's a plebiscite that's circling, a petition drive that will ban short-term rentals in all R1 districts for rentals less than 28 days. That will be coming forward on a ballot probably next year. I really welcome your voice on this issue because I'm asking to be a public servant, and I think that petition drive is a good thing. We need to decide this and let the entire city of Palm Springs vote on it, and then I'm going to honor that vote.
Part of my background is I'm a master's candidate from Cal Poly on urban planning. And I'm going to talk off and on a lot about planning practice and the importance of following it. But the zoning started in 1916. That's almost 100 years ago, a little bit, actually is 100 years ago. And the states, California, the other states, follow standardized processes. Almost 98 percentile of the jurisdictions follow the same laws for the same reasons. They've been compiled by experts. They've been reviewed by courts of law, including the appellate courts and the Supreme Court. There are reasons for following the principles. The primary principle is that residential use is for residential peace and quiet. That is the primary and legal use in a residential area. Hotel use or commercial use in an area is secondary, ancillary to the primary use, and it must be compatible with, and it cannot be with the primary use, and it cannot be a public nuisance. That is a legal obligation that is non-optional for us to face, and that's the one that I advocate for this. Our homes are a haven for peace and quiet because we work hard, we're retired, we put a huge investment in them, and we need some type of shelter from a very busy and overwhelming world. That can't break down. It does not mean that people don't have legitimate investment rights in property, but they must be subservient to the larger interest, and that must be understood. Thank you.
I will say one thing. The party houses have to go. They just have to go. They're creating so much disturbance in neighborhoods. Longtime residents that have been here for the 35 years that we've been living here in the desert, they're having trouble with them. I can name 3 people right now that have been living in the desert as long as we have that have had serious issues with vacation rentals. But I'll tell you what, I wouldn't be sitting, and I said this morning, I wouldn't be sitting right here at this table, and if not but for a vacation rental back in 1978 that my grandparents did when they came down here from Oregon. And then my parents said, wow, this is kind of a cool place. Then they did a long-term lease. And that long-term lease ended up being a house that they bought in Las Palmas, which ended up being the secondary house to a house that we've lived in for as long as we've been here. So we got here because of that. The reality for me is, commercial use is one thing. Does that mean that leases don't count either? Before, there wasn't an ordinance, people. It was a check that you handed the landlord, and the landlord expected you just to behave yourself and not be crazy. And if there was a problem, you took care of it. Then they created an ordinance, but the problem is that there was never any teeth or enforcement in the ordinance. The city over the weekend gave up on these things. So all this left unabated, and we got to where we're at. And what we got to is a compromise position that works. The reality is there's so many people that won't ever even come to Palm Springs if they can't stay in a house because they want to bring the whole family, they're going to bring the grandparents, they may bring a dog, and they're going to bring 3 cars, and they don't want to pay for the hotel rooms. So let's just enforce the ordinance that's on the book, and I can tell you right now it's working because I went to the first hearing where they took these people up that were basically renting them online and putting them online without a registration. And we're talking a $5,000 fine in vacation rental court. And it happened. So there's teeth in that ordinance and it's working. And I think it's evident. I think that a lot of people are seeing that the noise is quieting down and people are starting to realize that they're going to get in trouble if they don't follow the rules.
Thank you, Henry, and thank you all. There's a question again from our audience about the CV link.
All right, so I think if there's enough signatures out there for a ballot measure, then so be it. I think that's how it should be. So without a doubt, but I think you guys all want a fair description of where I stand on the link. Okay, then I won't tell you how I feel about the link.
Why not? Why don't you want to hear what he has to say? Give the man 30 seconds. Go ahead,
Okay,
Henry.
so the link is this for me. The link is a legacy project. It's something that I've done actually. I went up to the tramway station, I got my running shoes on, and I ran the entire distance of the link here in Palm Springs. This was 110 degrees in the morning. Some people will think I'm crazy because I'm running in the heat, but I'm pretty good at doing it. And I'm behind Asina, behind his development, and I saw 4 people on their bikes on the concrete that they poured back there. In the summer, at 10 o'clock, there is definitely people out there that want the link. They think it's a fantastic idea. Of course, it has to be mitigated. The neighbors have to be respected, and their wishes need to be thought out. But this is something that I have a heart for. I have a heart for a path because the 23 years that I've been coming back and forth and living in other communities all throughout the United States, they've all had paths, big, long paths that everybody can recreate on. And I think it's something that's missing in the Valley and would help all of us.
The CV Link is a regional project that goes through all of the cities, has, from what I understand at this point, almost $100 million in funding at both state and federal levels. It does, however, create an obligation for us with maintenance and operation. That's been part of the problem. There are other residents that feel that their privacy has been invaded by it, so it's problematic. I do think it's something appropriate for the ballot, but I would put a preliminary process. Before going to the ballot, I think we need to have a lot of community consensus, a lot of community interaction on this, so that we flesh out more of a platform for what's gone wrong and why, if people have problems with this. The other thing that is not as well mentioned on this, say that it does go in. What was very important was the destination point is at the Magruder property, which is now Woodbridge. It's 30 acres on both sides of Palm Canyon Drive. That would have been a commercial, low-end tourism and neighborhood-driven commercial district. As the receiver for the CV Link, we violated what I call that same boring word, that general plan, didn't follow it, and converted those lots for developers' financial interest to single-family, high-end residential. And we have completely blown off the opportunity, if it is put in, of using the commercial lands for their appropriate use.
Well, I don't know if any of you remember what I recall as a child. Do you remember when they were proposing freeways? And they wanted to put freeways through your neighborhood? And do you remember the discussions that were being had in public forums at that time? Well, the CV Link is actually one of those things. It's a freeway for bicycles and electric vehicles and joggers. We have an incredibly beautiful city, an incredibly beautiful valley. I was a supporter of the CV Link from the beginning. The challenge of putting it to a ballot is that it goes through so many different municipalities that it's going to be difficult to find any consensus whatsoever among all of them. And so if you have a decision that is more regional, it's a little bit more easily accomplished as to whether you want to move forward or not. What we have now is one of the more difficult situations where the cities of Rancho Mirage and Palm Desert don't want in at all. And if we don't have an entire link, then is it worth doing a portion of the link at all? So I'm not so sure it's very, it's appropriate to put it on a ballot. I think that we need a regional look at this.
I'm in favor of the CV Link. I like the fact that it would bring people out into the environment, bikers, hikers and dog walkers, etc. But there's money, as mentioned, there's money out there. But if it's going to cost our city more money to maintain it and keep it clean, etc., then we'll have to take a hard look at it. And putting it on the ballot, I would go by what the voters say. I think the voters of Palm Springs should have a voice in it. But personally, I do like the CV Link.
I'm a supporter of CV Link. I think the northern route of CV Link must absolutely protect the privacy of the homes in Ascena and Four Seasons, and the redesign has been done to ensure that it does do that. And unless that is built that way, I would not support that route. But we do have a guarantee from CVAG they will build it down in the wash along those homes. CV Link is a public safety issue. Bicycles and cars do not mix. We had 8 fatalities last year in Palm Springs, 6 pedestrians, 2 bicyclists that were killed. Separating bicyclists from automobiles is the trend of the future. If you go to Europe, if you go to cities such as Bend, Oregon, Boulder, Colorado, many cities in Utah, in Oregon, they are creating separate trails, and people are traveling from all over the country to recreate and to cycle in places where they know it will be safe.
Yeah, good
for
to
them
get
cycle.
ideas from other areas, but certainly it's a costly undertaking as well. Christy? Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. I have not run the entire CV Link, just so everyone knows. I have sat on my couch for 16 hours at a time, working. So I'm trying to make sure you're still with us. It's been a long day. I think that I do support CV Link as an innovative and exciting investment into our community. It's not money coming out of our general fund or all our Palm Springs budget. It's money that's coming from outside sources like federal sources and other funds into our community. I've looked at the research and data about different programs like this, like the High Line in New York, and those have a huge economic impact into the community. I don't think we have enough services for families, young people, and people who want to be outside and use recreation. I want to raise kids here, and I'd love to take them on the CV Link. I think it's an exciting program. I think there are innovative ways that we can talk about maintenance, having different businesses adopt a mile or something like that, partner with Golden Voice so that they can pay for some of that. Those are real concerns. I think another issue is transparency in government and in CVAG, and making sure that these conversations come from the people and with community input. And I think that's some of the pushback from CV Link, is that communities weren't involved in the way that they wanted to be. And I will fight to make sure that all residents and all communities have a voice in these types of projects.
Thank you, Christy. And we have a gentleman, stand up if you would. What is your name?
My name is Stephen Sims. I head Go Bike USA. We're a nonprofit since 1988 here. We've worked with every type of bicycling in the valley. And I want to explain to all of you, I'd like to ask, how many of you ride a bike on any?
And the downtown redevelopment and finishing that project scores on a scale of 1 to 10 on questions, with 10 being highest, it scores 9.3. It is the single most thing that people want here in Palm Springs. They want the project built. Now, let me take you back to a little bit of the history of this place. There was a point in time when the Hyatt Hotel behind us wasn't there. And there was some heartache about the Hyatt Hotel going up as well. But what we have behind us here is the Hyatt Hotel, which is a fantastic hotel when it opened especially, and meeting space and all these great things that it brought. So I lived through that process, and I understood that there was a lot of heartache getting there, but then what we have is a fantastic hotel that's behind us. So it's absolutely important. In the 4-part plan that I've devised in my campaign to do better here for the residents in Palm Springs, one of the top issues is finishing the revitalization downtown and kickstarting the failed projects like the Stonehenge that the mayor talks about that's in the middle of town, and some others, and getting these things started, because that's revenue, right? We got revenue, we got jobs, we got more people coming here, and that revenue is going to translate into tax dollars, which is going to translate into a problem that we're not going to have with the pensions, because we're going to work with this budget and we're going to get things taken care of. So revitalization is huge. I call it the Renaissance. In 2014, I moved back here full time, and it was like in my face. Wow, this is truly amazing what's going on here, and I had never experienced anything like it in Palm Springs.
Two of us here tonight worked, as I said, for 3 years on the Public Corruption Task Force indictments. The primary problem, although there were 19 implicated projects, but the biggest and most pervasive was the downtown plan. Clearly, the city decided to move on this because they didn't know what a gap and a hole that kept going on for years and years. Nobody wants that. But it doesn't mean it's the end of the discussion. I have a pamphlet here tonight that was handed out to the public on the justified vote for Measure J. And here's the description of the project. It indicates the project of 3 visioning sessions with important input from hundreds of citizens. 30% more pedestrian open space than required under the project. Public open areas, the highest concentration of plazas and open areas downtown. Views of the mountains enhanced with 4 major new view corridors, improved traffic flow, low density project, 60% will be single story with a height limitation of 60 feet for the remainder. This is not what we got. Well, we ended up with an alleged racketeering scheme where hundreds of millions of public subsidies went out to Mr. Westman. There is a criminal indictment process. In fact, next week is the arraignment. But there is a civil process that goes along with this that the city has never initiated. When the city of Bell had a corruption scheme, they approached the state of California and they recovered $100 million in public funding as a result of monies that should not have transferred hands. That has very much created a conceptual plan, turned it over to the developer, and never again monitored that during a public hearing process. By the time this was finished, we had density, height, and mass that was approximately 5 times to 6 times what was originally anticipated. We've also done that in other projects in the last 10 years because we abandoned what I keep telling you, and I'm sorry to bother you with it, but I'll be saying general plan a lot. We did not follow our plan vision, which came from the people, from years of planning, called the Blueprint for Growth, the Constitution for Development, your general plan. And until we do, we're going to be facing a fiscal disaster, because when that is abandoned, we go into bankruptcy.
Well, to put it more succinctly, we had a bait and switch operation going on. We spent all of these years saying what we wanted, articulating it very clearly in public meetings, and we got all sorts of promises, and then as soon as they got Measure J, they shoveled all the money into John Westman's pocket and gave us a project that most people can't stand. So that's what happened. My hope for downtown is that at the end of the day, we end up owning it. That would certainly be one of my goals as a council member, to make sure that we get back this property, which should have been eminent domain from the day one. I've been here for 12 years. Steve Punier for 4 years was talking eminent domain. We need to take that property, we need to demolish the mall, we need to go out and find the best designers in the world to build the best possible project that we could get. What we got was the West Elm building. We got the Kimpton Hotel. Those are not the best designs. I will say, however, that the 2 new buildings that they're just finishing now on the corner of Talkwoods are actually quite good. If the rest of the project had been at that scale, we wouldn't have had to go to these lengths, and we wouldn't have 31 felony counts on the table. It's going to work, we'll make it work. They're gonna have tenants. It will be better than what we have, but it's a long, long way away from what we deserved.
I am for smart growth, but I don't want overbuilding, and I don't like building over our beautiful mountains. When I first came here, I could see the mountains. I kept coming back, and of course, the Measure J and the hotels and all that, we're all going to recognize there's some shenanigans were going on. I don't want to deal with that, but if I'm on the council, I will work to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. And I think we've worked through that. That's been spoken about. You don't need to hear any more about that. But in the future, we don't need a lot of buildings that probably later on, especially if they're hotels, I hope that they have done the research. And that it's not like they build it and they will come. Because if you got too many hotels, you're not going to be able to build all of them. So we have to watch it. And I will take a careful look at the next proposals that come through if I'm on the council, and make sure that they're reasonable, they don't break any codes, and no things are just twisted around to smoke and mirrors.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
I'm a member of the Planning Commission that worked with the new City Council to reduce the height and density of the downtown project by 40% and to ensure that the Town and Country Hotel was saved and restored. I have talked to the business merchants that are up and down Palm Canyon. They feel that first they were in a disaster zone with the old mall. Then they have been in a construction zone for years and years as construction has dragged on and lawsuit after lawsuit has delayed construction. Oh, shit. They want to see these projects completed and occupied. The Kimpton Hotel is close to opening. Many, many stores are close to opening, including a Mac store, and it won't affect absolutely everyone. But when I went down to Palm Desert a couple of weeks ago to buy a decent tube of lipstick, I thought to myself, you shouldn't have to drive to Palm Desert to get that. So we are going to change some of that. We're bringing some retail back to Palm Springs. There are indictments out there. We do not know what the outcome will be of those criminal cases, but there are government code sections that provide opportunities for the city to make recoveries. I believe we need to pursue absolutely every legal option that is available to us, but we should do it at the time that we know that we can make those recoveries. And we should not promise recoveries that we don't know that we can achieve.
We talked about Measure J. I supported Measure J, and we were excited about the revitalization of downtown. I agree that the city needed to be more aggressive and continues to need to be more aggressive with developers. We allow blight, we allow vacant land, and half-built projects for too long. What was the problem with the mall, and my husband grew up growing up there and going there, is that we were held hostage by a developer who essentially let it sit and affected our entire downtown. And it was an issue for our economy and for our local businesses, and for us as residents walking in our main downtown. Obviously, mistakes were made in that development. The developer admitted that there were mistakes in the planning process and in the set off from the street, and that it was too close to the street than they had even planned. Those are big issues. We have a lot of work to do to come together as a community. We have a lot of public trust to build back up with our city council and with landlords and people who own land in this community. I think we need to do, and that can be leadership from the city council in coming together to make sure that downtown is successful, that it's a vibrant project, that we can continue that smart growth. Palm Springs is unique and different. I've lived in a number of places in California, and what happens is all these cities are looking like little cookie cutter cities. I drive through I-5 and every single city looks the same with these box stores, right? Palm Springs has done an incredible job of keeping our uniqueness, our aesthetic, our special village feel. We need to continue that. We need to make sure that we stay unique and branded the way that we are, and that we don't become a downtown Santa Monica or, with huge skyscrapers. That includes talking to the tribe and reaching out with our shared vision of what downtown Palm Springs will look like going forward. I really want to focus on the future of Palm Springs, what the next 5 to 10 years can look like, and what we can do together.
So Christy, on that same note, someone says, how do you feel about preservation in the next 5 to 10 years? Where would you like to see the city when it comes to that?
Yeah, I support preservation. Like I said, I love the aesthetic here. I love mid-century modern architecture. Our house is a ranch, but we've tried to make it as mid-century modern as we can. We have the aqua door, which is the color I chose as my logo to represent what's unique and special about Palm Springs. I love that about us. New visitors love that and come here. You see the number of visitors that come just for Modernism Week. It's incredible, and millennials love it, and people from all over the country and the world come here for our architecture and for that design and aesthetic. So I think that's incredibly special and important to Palm Springs, and I'm happy to advocate for that.
Thank you. We talked a lot about transparency. A couple of you mentioned it early on, and I think in government overall, people want transparency. Leaders are representing the people. People have a right to know what the truth is, and to know that what you're doing, we are all privy to. I'll start with you, Robert. The issue of transparency in government, in local government, how important is that?
Well, we have 31 felony counts for corruption on the table. I think that says an awful lot. It's probably the most important thing to me. It is the primary reason that I'm running for city council. There are reforms that I think we should have had after the raid and the indictments, and those reforms haven't taken place. We have to stop doing backroom deals. One of the problems with the city's subcommittee system is 2 city council members get in a what am I missing?
A mouse?
Upstaged by a rat?
Oh my
What sort of a dive am I in?
Obviously, you must like the food around here, right?
So back to the mice, transparent mice. So one of the things we have to stop doing is we have to stop doing backroom deals with developers, because the way it's always gone down in Palm Springs is like 2 city council members, and in the case of these 31 felony counts, it was Steve Punier and Chris Mills in a back room with John Westman slicing and dicing the downtown and telling us what we're going to get. That has to stop. We can't be doing backroom deals.
Judy?
And I'm looking for a note here I can't find. I had a good graph, and there that goes. Okay. Transparency with the city goes back primarily to the indictments, because what essentially Robert and I were swimming with is a system, as I said before, that had totally, and in a fundamental way, lost its integrity. And one of the foremost things, I had a quote here from Mike Hestron, the district attorney, the day that the indictments came out. One thing is very important for Palm Springs to understand. This is not a scheme that involves 3 people. It is not ex-mayor Punier, John Westman, and Rich Meany. It was an influence scheme, not to buy the vote of the mayor, but it was to buy the influence to achieve a majority vote on 3 different panels: architectural, planning commission, and city council. And that, right in his statement was that was effectively achieved over time. That was because something very fundamental to this city was set aside, and it was called fair public hearing laws. When you're sitting in a planning commission, if you're sitting on a city council and making judicial decisions as administrative judges on a development in front of you, your obligation is to the evidence, to the law, and to the setting at that hearing. What you don't do is pre-decide based upon influence and contact, inappropriate contact between members of the city council prior to that vote. There are, if you go through the criminal indictments, and I'll try to put it up on my own website, you will see that there are approximately 8 named individuals who are in those indictments that either got on a text, an email, or a phone call that was subsequently recorded, where they had predetermined what the vote would be on over 19 projects. As a record of transparency, this is a disgrace to this city. It's why I'm going in. It's what needs to change profoundly. And there has been very little inside work to change this.
I think we live in an era where the web pretty much allows you to see information about anything and everything. You can Google anything and find out about something or somebody within seconds. There's absolutely no reason that our city website can't be more user-friendly. Trust me, in this process running for city council, there have been several meetings that I would try to find, whether it was a budget subcommittee meeting or a planning committee meeting or whatever, and it was so hard to find it. And there was no way to figure out when it was, and you miss it. But here's the other reality to it. The other reality is that these meetings are all when you're at work or when you can't be at them. They're at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 11 o'clock in the afternoon or in the morning or whenever. So what's transparent about that? You show up to some of these meetings. I see somebody from the newspaper here, and he shows up because that's part of his job. But the rest of us, it isn't.
But Henry, let me ask you this. As a candidate, and if you're elected, what would you do personally to make sure that there's transparency in the council?
We got to revamp the website. We got to revamp the website. We got to make these processes and these meetings more transparent to the public so that they can be aware of these meetings. Recorded videos, you name it, YouTube, however we can do it. The technology is there for this transparency to exist. We just need to follow that process. And I think that some of the meetings get just dragged out, and before you know it, something's happened. You didn't even know it happened.
But when you say it starts with you, the council member, first.
That's right. So I mean, and that's the top of the list. But one of the first things that I'd like to see changed is the way the information is presented to you, the public, and so that a website is easy to use, effective, and that you can see things on it and you can be a part of the process, and it becomes more transparent that way by default.
Glenn?
Transparency. When I was on the task force, which appropriately named Ethics, Transparency, and Government Reform, I was on the Communications Committee. And some of the things I already mentioned, we put in our report of recommendations. You can call me old-fashioned, if you want to, but yes, I'm all for websites and all the technology that's already out there to get the message across. But I feel that council members should go out and talk to people 101 or 10, 20, groups like this, face to face, and say, look, we got this issue coming up on the city council, and what is your take on it? Give me some input. I don't claim to have I would not claim to have all the answers, but you got to have communications. And if you want to reinstitute, I guess, trust in City Hall, it starts with that. Get out in the streets and talk to the people, talk to the voters, and look them in the eye and say, look, I'm going to do A, B, C, and D. What do you think of that? They might say, hell no, do X, Y, and Z. So you get enough of that. So you get communication right from the heart, right from the eyeballs of the people and the voices.
Well, I guess I'm like Glenn, I'm a little old-fashioned as well. And certainly one of my experiences with 1PS is when you deal with people face-to-face, one-on-one, issues can get resolved. So I have pledged that if I'm elected, I will hold office hours every week in City Hall. No appointment necessary. I don't care who you are, whether you have $1 million or you're living out of the back of your car. I will sit down and meet with you and discuss your issues and listen to what your problems are. If you've got an opinion about how City Hall should be run, I will listen to it. I will also go out into each one of our 44 neighborhoods, and I will have a meeting in each neighborhood once a year. That's going to take up most of the year. I will be out and visible and around to answer questions. So frequently, what we find is rumors get started, then it gets repeated on the internet, then it gets exacerbated by someone else on the internet, and the next thing you know, what originally happened had absolutely no semblance of reality in comparison to what it originally was. It's a full-time job for a city council member to be out in the public explaining what's going on in simple, common language that people can understand. I will do that. Lastly, the Government Reform and Ethics Task Force that I sat on and chaired the Diversity Committee. 30 of those recommendations have already been implemented. The report was 97 pages long. If I am on the City Council, I will do absolutely everything I can to ensure that every one of those recommendations is reviewed and acted on before the end of 2018.
I said earlier, we have a lot of public trust to earn back in our city council. That those cases will be decided by a court of law. We need to talk about what we need to do to go forward, to continue on improved transparency in city processes. There are a few different issues that the task force took on, and I've read that 90-page report a few times in my campaign to talk about what policies we can implement so we can improve transparency, so we can improve accessibility to city council, so we can improve diversity, so we can talk about government reform. Those are all separate issues that have separate policy recommendations. I agree with Henry, we need to do a lot more to improve accessibility to city council so that people can access our website. I think transparency comes down to leadership and who you elect to city council. It matters a lot, the rules that we have in place for elected officials. It matters the law. So I'm proud to have signed the Code of Fair Campaign Practices. I filed that with the city. It's voluntary, but it can any candidate can choose to sign it, and I did. I've tried my best to be overly transparent and honest in running my campaign. I had my kickoff party at my own home. I've had a number of campaign events at our own home, so you know where I live. I put my work phone number on my business card. I'm there working, and you can reach me. I put my email there. I'm happy and proud. I took ethics courses in law school. I had to take a separate ethics exam.
Thank you,
I
Kristen.
had to take a moral character exam. That's extremely important, and I think we need to hold our elected officials to extremely high standards.
Very good, thank you. A lot of people in the audience would like to know your party affiliation, so
And agree to work things out together for the better of the city. That's what I want to do.
I come from a family of Democrats, but I do not like labels. I voted Republican, I voted Democratic. I was a Reagan Republican when I worked with the Pentagon because it was for a strong defense, and I was for that. So I look at people and get ideas from people that they're sound ideas. I listen, and I would use those ideas if feasible, if possible. So I don't like to be pigeonholed. So basically right now, I guess I'm independent.
I don't like labels, and I think they often confuse things. But there's no confusion between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party today. I'm extremely proud to be a Democrat. I had the Desert Stonewall Democrats endorsement, Riverside County Democrats endorsement, Democratic Women of the Desert's endorsement. Stonewall Democrats out of West LA endorsed my campaign earlier this week. But some of my biggest endorsers and financial supporters are Republicans because they know I will listen to absolutely every side of every argument and that I will put common sense solutions in place and get things done within our city. I am very proud to have support absolutely across the spectrum for the kinds of issues that this city needs in order to move forward. Thank you.
I'm the daughter of a teacher, a special ed teacher, so I think you know that I was raised as a Democrat. I'm proud to be a Democrat. I've only ever voted for Democrats. I care about social justice and change and representation for all communities. I'm not running for one party. I'm running for my clients, for the people that I see every day who lack a voice in this system, to address poverty and homelessness that is significant in Palm Springs. I don't think we can set aside social issues. I think it permeates throughout our lives. Social issues affect my clients and our community's lives every day, and that's important in Palm Springs. And we have unique Palm Springs values, and it's important to talk about those. I'm running a grassroots campaign that's involved just residents. I've spent 4 months walking door to door in 120-degree heat to talk to residents. I've gotten young people and diverse people involved in the political process. I think that's more important than running for any political party. Though I am proud to have received Congressman Ruiz's endorsement. It's the first endorsement I sought out because I worked with him so closely on veterans and Social Security issues. I'm proud to have received the endorsement from the Riverside County Democratic Party, Desert Stonewall Democrats, Democratic Women of the Desert, and a number of different clubs, as well as the Firefighters Association. I'm a Democrat, but I'm talking about the economy. I'm talking about bringing local government back to basics, what a local government is supposed to do for us, which is public safety, good streets and roads, amenities for our quality of life, and growing the economy so that Palm Springs can work for everyone.
thank you very much. We're going to wrap